Good evening, everybody. Welcome in. You're on a heater, Norman. Really? What are you hitting? What are you on a heater on? Your GEV or whatever? LEU? Oh, wow. Wow. Dude, those nuclear power names are definitely an emerging theme, and I was planning on talking about that same idea tonight. You caught all those, Norman? Every single one? If so, that is pretty impressive, actually. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. Give everybody else the chance to hop on in here. How are you guys all doing tonight? Hopefully everybody's been having a decent day, decent week. It's been a good week, in my opinion. Pretty simple. Yeah, kind of chilly in California, huh? It's cloudy right now, dude. It's been cloudy all day for me. Kind of sucks. I mean, I guess it is that time of year. You're feeling blessed, Husky? All right. I'm happy to hear it. Good to see you. We'll give it like 2 more minutes approximately, then we'll get going. How's everybody else doing? Wow, Faye's joining us tonight. Good to have you, Face. Get ready to send one more message. So just turn this last thing up. All right. Let's see. SK, you wanted to enter SMR shares yesterday, but it ran like hell today. Amazon had some big nuclear related news this morning. Yeah. And I think we could probably start with that topic. I'll get to it in a bit before I'll introduce kind of the high level concept of this lecture tonight. And then we'll get into it in a bit more detail. So welcome in, everybody. How is everybody doing tonight? Hopefully, everybody's having a good night tonight. Tonight, the lecture is titled Market Sectors, I believe is the title. And a lot of what this discussion typically is it's based off of a PowerPoint where I talk about kind of the basics of market sectors, what they are, what are the main different sectors, et cetera, et cetera. which we've done the lecture a couple times now. So at this point, it makes more sense to me to we'll give a brief overview of what the sectors of the market are, but instead of focusing on what the sectors are, I'd rather focus on how to actually use them and understand the importance of theme-based trades. And you likely haven't heard that specific term before. Maybe you have, maybe a market theme or specific group of stocks that typically move together. But tonight we're going to talk about that, and I'll lead with an example here, which it seems like Norvin has been all over this. Nuclear has been a super significant emerging theme in the marketplace. So back on September 20th of this year, Microsoft announced that they wanted to commit some amount of money annually to essentially purchase nuclear power for AI data centers from this company, Constellation Energy Group. And this news came out on 9/20, right here, 9/20. So on this day specifically, Microsoft announced that they want to begin purchasing nuclear energy from this specific company. Constellation produces, I think, a large amount of types of energy. I know they do solar, obviously also nuclear. And this really ignited a kind of new theme in the marketplace. And although I personally didn't get to capitalize on it, some definitely did. And this sort of cycle repeats itself over and over again. So the intent of today is to first introduce, again, the basic concepts of kind of what the sectors of the market are at a very high level. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into kind of some specific themes within each one of those sectors. And just to give a couple examples before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of everything, some examples of market sectors would be things like consumer discretionary, technology, utilities, that sort of thing, very high level. There's a lot of stocks that could fit into that blanket. But for example, some more specific, you could call them sectors or maybe even themes or even groups, definitely all synonyms of each other, like crypto stocks, right? There's a much more limited subset of names that fit into that umbrella. And even crypto miners, right? You're nailing down even more on a specific group of stocks. And same thing here, right? These nuclear stocks, typically they would be fit under the energy umbrella, but now we're kind of refining even deeper into a specific subset of those energy names, which are all focused around the nuclear theme. Either they produce nuclear energy, they have some sort of involvement in the value chain there. And the list goes on, right? For example, within tech stocks, you have maybe subgroups of semiconductors, you have your subgroups of software names, and even within those software names, you have your cybersecurity names. So again, there's a lot of niche to it. But the big idea and kind of the lesson that I want to hopefully share with you all throughout the course of this lecture is when stocks are moving together as a group, that automatically is going to increase the probability of any trade that you take within that sector. So for example, if semiconductors as a group are moving higher in the marketplace, generally speaking, any trade that you take on semiconductors will have a higher probability of working if you are taking the trade in the direction where the larger group is moving. And the list goes on and on for different groups that this has worked for recently, right? You could look back to semiconductors, you could look back to software names, now nuclear names, crypto names. I mean, the list, again, it goes on and on and on, right? So again, that's the big idea for the lecture. Anybody have any questions or comments before I just give a quick kind of high level, maybe even I'll just tell a little bit more about the story of this nuclear trade as of recent, and then we'll get into kind of the high level again. So any questions before we get going tonight? All right, let's get started then. Mr. AMD is ready to go. So again, coming back to kind of the nuclear theme, again, back on September 20th, some news came out where a nuclear power plant owned by Constellation, which has been closed for years, I think, and also I think it's called 3 Mile Island, which had some kind of large nuclear accident. Anyway, that's not so significant. Regardless, Microsoft had some news that came out when they wanted to open a new nuclear plant or commission some nuclear plant to restart in order to, maybe they did have a deal with VST, but they definitely also had one with Constellation. Maybe they had multiple. Anyway, this definitely kicked off a new theme in the marketplace, which was nuclear energy powering AI data centers. And Norvin seems to be all over it, and he's got a couple interesting names that he's been looking into. And we could just take a look on how multiple nuclear names reacted on this 9/20 news. So you have CEG for Constellation, CCJ, I think they are uranium miner. Here's 9/20 right here, right? Nice big gap up and has been absolutely ripping ever since that day. I think URA, that's probably our uranium ETF. 920, massive gap higher, and has continued higher ever since then. I got to find the tickers that Norvin dropped in the chat. I don't even remember what they were at this point. Where'd they go, Norvin? BST, maybe? No. Anyway, let's see. UEC is probably one, uranium energy. So the point I'm trying to get across is every single name with some amount of their fundamental value chain related to nuclear power had a big move higher on September 20th, right? Whether they were related to the news or not, right? The direct beneficiary was CEG, Constellation Energy Group, getting $800 million a year from Microsoft. But the sector as a whole has an entirely new value proposition, which is being that kind of source for renewable energy for the future for AI data centers. And as a result, ever since that day, we've seen more news come out. We've seen more names continue to move higher. NNE, yeah, probably one that recently got some news today. So again, the big idea is that this nuclear group as a whole has experienced a significant power trend. I mean, same with, I think, Oklo is one of them. I mean, massive move up, 920, massive move higher, continues to move higher. I think they got a new deal today with maybe Amazon. So the big idea is when these themes are moving together, it makes for very high probability and high quality trades. And this is a name, obviously, we're looking at in hindsight, right? It's very easy for us to look back at any group of names and say, oh, yeah, look, look at all these nuclear names that are all moving together and up hundreds of percent off the lows. But these sorts of trades are not one-offs, right? These sorts of trades happen very frequently. Again, right, it recently happened with the semiconductor names and the whole AI kind of revolution, if you want to call it that. We're starting to see some of that in our cybersecurity names, right? Some names like PanW, Palo Alto, starting to show some relative strength, including in the same group as Crowd, CRWD, even a little bit of Snow. So again, these groups very typically move together. And the reason that this matters, and the reason I've given a 10-minute introduction to this concept, is this kind of goes back to the last couple of lectures where we've been talking about relative strength. We've been talking about finding the highest quality trades. And finding a group of names that all fit within one kind of overall theme, that are all moving together, always helps you find a higher probability trade. You could, again, so many examples of this in recent history. So that's kind of the introduction. That's kind of the goal, is kind of getting you guys all to be able on the same page, understanding how to find these sorts of trades, how to understand the different groups of the market. So we'll start a bit higher level and just talk about the overall sectors of the market. Again, really kind of high level here. So let me just get this graphic up really quick that I don't have. All right. So we're going to skip around a little bit in this PowerPoint. So I'll just get right into it. I'm not really going to talk about this too much, but essentially a lot of the sectors are represented by what are called ETFs, exchange traded funds. So you could trade a group of utility stocks. You could probably trade a group of nuclear stocks. You could probably trade a whole lot of other random groups of stocks through ETFs, which are essentially just created by different firms, and they're meant to track different securities. They could also hold groups of assets. And anyway, the SPY is an example of an ETF. So I'm not going to go into this too much. Again, a lot of the major market indices have corresponding ETFs. This is likely a concept that most of us are familiar with. Probably a lot of us trade the SPY or the Qs. Those are ETFs that represent an index. Those ETFs very commonly mirror the movements of the index very closely in the case where they represent an index. In the case where the ETFs represent some physical commodity like gold or silver or platinum, or even something not so physical, a little bit less tangible like bonds. Generally speaking, the ETF is 99 to 100% correlated with the movements of the index that it is based on, which is why the ETF is desirable. So this is what I really wanted to get to, which is the high-level list of market sectors. So I believe there's about 11 official kind of high-level market sectors, which include technology. Again, some names that fit into the technology group could be our software names, electronics, or even kind of micro components like RAM, that sort of thing, and your semiconductor names. Then moving on, you have your financial names, which could look like a Wells Fargo. It could look like Bank of America. It could also look like Visa. You have your communications names, which Meta and Google kind of fit into this, or excuse me, Meta and AT&T and Netflix fit into this group, even though maybe Meta and Netflix could also kind of be considered tech stocks in some respect. Then you have your consumer cyclical names, which could look like Amazon. And again, Amazon's kind of one of those funky ones where it could be a tech stock, it could be a retail stock or consumer retail stock because they're direct to consumer. You have your auto manufacturers, so your Ford, your Stellantis, your restaurants even kind of fit into here sometimes. It could be your McDonald's. Then you have your energy names, pretty cut and dry, your Exxon Mobil, that sort of thing. Your industrials, these are a little bit lesser known typically, but could be a Boeing, also some of those rail companies. Then you have your consumer discretionary names. So this could be things like Coca-Cola. It could be, let's see, Dollar Tree, your tobacco name. So Altria, which owns Marlboro and Juul and all that stuff. Then you have your real estate names, which are generally speaking going to be your REITs. So real estate investment trusts. So things like O. Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. Then your utilities, which kind of your nuclear might even fit into this. Again, your power stocks, your Constellation Energy might even fit into this group. Some of your solar names fit into this group as well. And then finally, you have your basic materials. So things like US Steel, chemical manufacturers, like I think DuPont is publicly traded. Anyway, these are the high level sectors of the market. And this is kind of that first step to begin detecting larger trends in the marketplace. And as you could probably imagine, every single one of these market sectors have a corresponding ETF. Oh, I forgot we had these two slides. Also, which this command's out of date, I'm just going to get rid of it. Also, there's plenty of kind of visuals that allow you to get just a quick pulse check on what the sectors of the market are actually doing at a high level. So here you can see this nice little graphic where you can generally see what every high level sector in the market is doing throughout the marketplace. It can be nice to just get a quick, like I said, pulse check on what's going on, what the trends are. Like, for example, on this day, you could see healthcare seem to be not so great, where your tech stocks, your comm stocks, even your Amazon seem to be standouts, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise. And again, as I mentioned, every single one of your market sectors have a corresponding ETF. And you might be wondering why this matters. Well, the purpose of this ETF is going to be for you to perform your technical analysis on, and I guess maybe fundamental, but that wouldn't be super beneficial. But the ETF is for you to review the chart of, so you can determine and evaluate the trend of that given sector. You could evaluate the technical conditions, whether it's at a critical level, whether it's nearing support, whether it's setting up in some kind of consolidation or some actionable trade is nearing. Those are the things that you'd be looking for within these ETFs. So let's give one other quick way to do this. Also on FinViz, there's this nice visualization here, which I've introduced once before, which allows you to see some of the names that are performing the best in the marketplace and some names that are performing the worst. You can see today, financials were a big standout. And what you could do is go to financials. You could sort by large market cap names, go to performance and figure out what is performing the best on the day in financials. And you could see our CLSK, which that's very interesting that that's a financial name because that typically moves with, wow, this is really interesting. The crypto names are fitting within the financials basket. That's something I never realized actually. Wow. But anyway, you can kind of see some themes here, right? You have UPST, also a firm would probably fit into this category. Those kind of buy now, pay later sort of emerging theme there. And then also you have a lot of other banks. And what's cool about this website is you could hover over and you can see where it fits into the value chain or into the sector. So this is a regional bank here. A lot of regional banks we're seeing pop up on the scan. So anyway, that could prompt you to think, okay, it seems like regional banks are for some reason experiencing some form of relative strength. And if you know a little bit about regional banks, you would know that they also have their own ETF where you can monitor them, which is KRE. And lo and behold, it looks like they had some kind of breakout today, which it looks to be just recovering now from that whole Silicon Bank dump back in early 2023, which looks like midweek we're getting a nice breakout over this 59.60 area. So it could be something for you to target for longs in the next couple of weeks, right? It seems like we're seeing some kind of emerging theme here with these regional banks. They're likely experiencing some tailwinds as a result of those rate cuts that are impending from the Federal Reserve. So again, right, this is kind of the workflow. I've been talking for probably 10 minutes straight about this and pretty quickly. So I want to take a quick pause. How's everybody feeling? Any questions, comments, concerns so far before we keep this going? I agree with you, Norman. It definitely makes trading less stressful when you know you have the backing of that kind of sector theme to go with whatever trade that you're taking. It definitely helps when there's some kind of fundamental story or reason behind an obvious reason by why a name is moving the way it is. That definitely is helpful. Feeling like George Belfort. Don't actually know who that is. Yeah, I was gonna say, pretty sure Jordan Belfort is who you were thinking. Yeah, I was like George. Oh man, it's all right, Norman. You'll get there one day, my friend. All right, gotta go watch the movie again. All right, so let's bring this back up. I'll just talk you guys through my workflow again. I've talked about this before, but I figured I'd highlight it anyway. So let's go back. I've got the Zoom thing in the way. Let's go back here to this guy. All right. So again, this highlights kind of what's been performing the best over these longer term periods. You can see utilities pops up on this scan in 2 or 3 different places, which this was not refreshed actually. So utilities was a standout today. So we have utilities outperforming over the last day, the last week, and the last 3 months, and the last half year. So utilities definitely showing some strength. The next one that pops up here is technology, showing up in 2 to 3 locations. So utility and technologies or technology names are going to be our leaders of the market in the short term here. So what we could do is take a look at our kind of most or our best looking utilities names by going in here, filtering by sector, going into performance, and just filtering by what's been performing best over the week. Wow, which Oklo is #1 this week, which this is involved in our nuclear energy theme. And you could probably imagine these nuclear names all fit into this utilities sector as a whole. So again, you have your constellation, Oklo being your nuclear name, and you could kind of scan through really quickly and just look for those names with the most ideal technical setups super quickly, which is something that I definitely like to do. So this is kind of one way to start figuring out these emerging themes, right? Just by reviewing these charts, this is one good way to do it. You could just have watch lists that are dedicated that you build on your own for these specific trades as well. Like for example, you could comprise a list of nuclear names, you could comprise a list of crypto names, all those sorts of things. But for me personally, I actually like finding those kind of emerging themes this way. It makes it a little bit simpler. And then one other way to kind of stay up on these emerging themes is just being tuned in to what's going on in the market, right? Those of you who are aware, maybe hopefully you all are aware of this, but understood that you aren't. But fundamentally speaking, the market is moved by fundamental changes in the outlook of a given stock, whether current or future. So, for example, the reason investors buy stocks is the potential for earnings growth. That's very commonly going to be the driver of longer term buys at this point, right? The kind of rate tailwind, or I guess headwind, has subsided, right? The rates by the Federal Reserve are set to drop here in the next couple months. The kind of recession headwind has certainly lost significance, right? It's seeming like things are looking better and better every month. Obviously, that still could change, but for the most part, that's going well. So as a result, there's really one thing left for investors to focus on, which is future earnings growth. So as a result, those are going to be the names that are going to be invested in the most frequently. And you'll notice, right, the most kind of recent theme there was that nuclear AI play. And obviously, when a company's earnings is going to increase significantly based on these AI data centers looking to get involved with nuclear energy, obviously the stock price is going to reflect that as investors begin to price in and purchase more of a given stock in order to potentially capitalize on that future earnings growth. So while directly buyers and sellers move the marketplace, there's always some fundamental reason to be a buyer or a seller of a stock. And when that story changes, it's very important to stay on top of that if you're looking to get involved. So, for example, again, I can't stress it enough, but hearing that nuclear power plants are potentially going to be invested in by AI companies in order to power their data centers is a massive fundamental change, right? That's a completely new idea. It's not something that's being done currently, or maybe at smaller scales. So it's a fundamental change to the sector as a whole. And as a result, something to be paying attention to. Anyway, that's my spiel on why to care. Let's talk a little bit about identifying these names at this point. So I want to just pull up a couple more of these charts here. So for example, we could pull up XLU real quick. I haven't looked at this one in a little while, but that's okay. And let's just compare it to something like, oops, did not want to push that. Let's compare it to something like, let's see, we'll compare it to something that's been a bit weaker here, probably XLRE. Cool. All right. So very clearly, there's a massive difference between these two charts, right? I think this is something that we also talked about in the last lecture, but these two charts are very clearly not the same, right? One of these names is currently leading the market, breaking all-time highs. The other one is still recovering and actually starting to look pretty good as it continues to recover, and definitely not at a bad spot. But there's very clearly one sector that's leading the market higher. And generally speaking, you want to be trading, at least as a shorter term options trader, you want to be getting long on the names within the sectors that are leading the market higher, so breaking out before the S&P, before the Qs. And then within that sector, you want to be getting in those names that are leading the sector higher as well. So you're essentially getting in the true market leaders or the strongest names that the most investors are looking to get involved in. Because again, as a shorter term options trader, your goal is really going to be to capitalize on that momentum in either direction. Obviously, as somebody who's maybe more focused on medium to longer term, that's not necessarily the only way to make your investment decisions, obviously. But something for somebody with a shorter term mindset, that is absolutely the most important thing to consider. So with that said, that brings you essentially directly to this utility sector, which after all that doesn't necessarily mean that a short-term option trader should be getting long right now necessarily, but it definitely should be something that you are paying attention to, right? And has certainly provided two really nice trades as of recently, which is this one on this retest of the previous all-time highs and this one on the other previous retest of the all-time highs, right? Two pretty reasonably simple trades here. Even a break above this pivot here is also generally a reasonable idea or place to be getting long. And not everybody wants to be trading this, XLU ETF. Generally speaking, these ETFs have a bit lower liquidity. So that means you should be driven towards some of the individual names that are leading the market higher, which again, within the utility sector right now drives us to those renewable names and specifically some of the nuclear names. So we've looked at these names already, but that's going to be your, UUU, GEV is one of them leading the market higher. I mean, multiple bases to get involved in here. Definitely extend in the short term, but still opportunities here. NEE, I thought they were solar only. Yeah, they're solar only, I think, but still some nice strength here. UUUU is another one. This one not quite leading the sector higher, but definitely a larger breakout today. CCJ, again, right on the verge of a larger breakout here as well. So one to begin monitoring pretty closely. Wish I got involved all the way down here like I was supposed to. That's besides the point. Anyway, this is really the workflow, right? You want to be looking for the strongest sectors as a shorter term trader. And within those sectors, you want to be finding the strongest names. And again, I can't stress this enough. I'm tripping over my own words. The reason that you should be caring about these names with relative strength is because of the fact that the probability that you are right on a given trade and the probability that a trade will work in a short amount of time is higher, right? It's just one extra reason that you are going to be right on a trade. And a saying that I'm sure everybody's heard is a rising tide lifts all boats, right? If a sector is moving in one direction, generally speaking, the whole sector is moving together, right? And if it isn't, the names that aren't really moving with the rest of the names in the group, you probably should just avoid or focus on maybe something a bit longer term if you have a reason to be doing so. Anyway, that's kind of my spiel. I want to take another pause. Any questions, comments up to this point? Anything else to add, Face? I asked you to unmute if you want to. Face is shy. Yeah, ignorant. Yeah, for sure. We can take a look at that. One other thing that I wanted to pull up is just another way to gauge interest, which happens for this specific example to be Google search trends. You can see over the last 12 months, this nuclear reactor, the average was what, around 50 on this ranking, and slowly creeping up and now reaching a peak. I don't know. I figured I'd share that because it's pretty interesting. All right, so applying this concept to something broad like the SPY, right? Great question. Obviously, the SPY is a super diverse basket representing 500 to 502 of what the S&P considers to be the most important names in the market at a given time, right? The most influential, the most stable, et cetera, et cetera. So the SPY generally represents about 500 incredibly strong companies. And what you want to be looking for in this is the S&P should always be used as a kind of high level gauge of the trend in the market, right? If the S&P is trending higher, very generally, you likely want to be looking for trades with a long bias, right? If the market is trending higher, it's always going to be easier to be long rather than be short. And this is a concept that I think we looked at maybe one or two lectures ago. But when, at least in the shorter term, right, we have these positively trending EMAs with the 10 EMA above the longer term 20 EMA, you should pretty much always be looking to get long as a general rule of thumb. Now, there's always a time and place to look for those short opportunities, right? Maybe at a real key resistance level or otherwise, right? There's definitely a time and place to be looking for those opportunities short and kind of fight the trend. Me personally, that's not something that I typically employ as part of my strategy, but absolutely understand that that is definitely a valid way to trade for some, and also can be incredibly profitable. But at least for me, right, I can speak on my experience with the fact that I'm always looking for trades that are in agreement or matching the overall trend of the SPY. So again, the SPY is trending to the upside right now, so I'm not really looking to go short on the marketplace. I have no interest in buying puts. I have no interest in freaking out over minor pullbacks like this either. The direction of the SPY for me is used to set my overall bias on the market. And I can't stress that enough. On pullbacks like this, I'm not worried, right? I'm not really scared. You know, we have a little bit of elevated sell volume. It looks a bit dangerous, but also we were 5% approximately, or maybe a little less than that. Okay, never mind. Why did I think we were so much higher? Okay, well, we were 1.5% at the highs extended from the EMAs, which is pretty far. I mean, if you look back and see previous reversals, we were about that extended as well. Like here's a previous reversal. We were about 1.5 or greater percent extended from the EMAs. So in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't the best place to be getting long at 2 days ago's close anyway. But again, to answer shortly, the S&P is used for me to set my overall gauge of the trend of the market. Does that make sense, trader? We'll look at that later, Norman. Yeah, that makes sense in regards to using SPY to trade other stocks. Or what if you're trying to trade SPY? Yeah, so if you're trying to trade SPY, you're not really going to gauge it against much else, right? SPY is essentially the kind of, I'll say, main gauge of the overall direction of the market. Now, you could certainly compare it to some maybe like QQQ. You could maybe compare it to like IWM to just check, SPY versus IWM. Is it mega caps that are leading or large caps, or is it small caps that are leading? You could maybe differentiate between the two, which right now we're in an environment where small caps are kind of leading here in the short term. That said, though, for SPY, generally speaking, I'm not really looking to necessarily compare it to anything else. I would really just be trading whatever analysis I'm using on the SPY. So for me personally, I have my key levels shown here. I have my EMAs on the chart. I'm long above 580. I'd probably also be getting long at 575 just because these are key pivots in the trend. But in terms of using kind of sector analysis on the SPY, it's not something that I personally typically feel the need to employ. Does that make sense? it's just not really serving us as nearly as much of a benefit as maybe comparing other sectors to each other. Yeah, I guess when trading the ETFs in general, the these kind of SPY, QQQ, the indexes, I guess there's definitely a bit more nuance to it, I get in that sense. Any other questions? That was a good one. If not, I'll talk about how to kind of determine, from a technical standpoint, a couple different things. We'll talk about determining the trend of a given sector. Then we'll talk about giving or determining what sector is stronger than another, and maybe some kind of new tricks to do that in Thinkorswim that maybe you guys weren't aware of. All right, so let's pull up two sectors next to each other, just two high-level sectors. We'll take a look at XLE for energy, and we'll take a look at XLU for utilities, two sectors that are moving reasonably opposite at this point in time. So for me personally, the way that I like to trade and analyze charts on the daily at least is I love using these short-term EMAs. And I love the way that they can be animated as kind of like a cloud like this because it makes it expressly clear exactly what's going on. And I'll just zoom into just 2024 to make it a bit larger for everybody. All right. So using these clouds here, it makes it pretty clear what's been stronger throughout 2024. XLU has been in a much stronger trend for the majority of 2024. Energy definitely had what was looking pretty promising earlier this year and has really waned since then and kind of not done much and really just sat within a range, which isn't necessarily bearish. It's not necessarily bullish either, but it really hasn't gone anywhere over the last 6 months approximately. Some significant moves lower, some significant moves higher, but for the most part, it hasn't really done much. And comparing that to something like XLU, it has very clearly been in a trend, and not only a trend, but a very clear and strong uptrend for the majority of 2024, which started all the way back here when we first got those EMAs flipping positive. And kind of my first sense of risk off or risk on is number one, just kind of price action analysis. So are we setting higher highs and higher lows? In the case of XLU, we are, right? Higher high here, higher low here, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, etc. So just based on price structure alone, the trend is up, whereas we don't have that same structure on XLE. Second step for me would be looking to volume price analysis. And I have a whole lecture series on this, so I'm not going to be able to explain it in detail because I spent 6 lectures talking about it in detail. So I'm just going to save it for that. But generally speaking, when I'm doing volume price analysis, I'm looking for volume to confirm moves in price. And very simply put, if we see a large move to the upside in price, I would also like to see large above average volume to correspond to that same move. So those are kind of the first two things I'm using, right? I'm looking at the price action, determining the trend based on just higher highs, higher lows, then looking at volume price analysis to confirm any of those moves that we're seeing. And then finally, just kind of as a supplement or gut check, pulling these EMAs up, looking to see if the trend is positive, is a 10 EMA above the 20 EMA on the daily. If it is, we're definitely in an uptrend. If it's not, we're probably in a downtrend. If it's flat or neutral, definitely just kind of a cautionary or warning or potential trend change period. Good time for us to sit out. So those are the first steps I'll take in order to figure out what the trend of a name is and what the strength of that trend is. And then you can compare those kind of pieces of analysis to each other. And I guess just as a quick note, I'm listing these all out as steps, but as you get more repetitions in doing this sort of workflow, you kind of just look at a chart and it becomes automatic, right? So, maybe after 3-6 months of looking at these charts with the same lens, you're not going to be marking out, okay, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. You're going to look at a chart and you can see it and you know for sure that it's the way it is. Same thing with the EMAs. It makes it pretty easy to figure out what the trend is here. Same with VPA. It makes it pretty simple and it's a pretty quick kind of line of thinking there. Another way to kind of analyze the relative strength of one sector versus another, there's actually this pretty cool feature in Thinkorswim here, where, for example, what I can do is type in XLU divided by XLE. Oh, what? It doesn't work? No way. Wow. XLU minus XLU works. And XLU plus XLU works. Oh, I remember how it is. Hang on. What's up, FaZe? You just unmuted for whatever reason. All right. So this is what I was thinking about. That was embarrassing. Really thought that was supposed to work. Anyway, here's another way to do it. So you can overlay the two charts on top of each other over a given period. So you can kind of see how this works. It's the same idea, right? So for example, you could see kind of where the progress of XLU surpassed that of XLE in this given period. And it's reasonably easy to see the difference here. I think you could also set this to show as candles, so it's even more clear. And you can see the exact difference between these two charts overlaid on top of each other. So anyway, this is just another way to compare how two different names are trading versus each other. And I'd like to think it's pretty easy, but maybe more complicated than it needs to be. And we can even do this for some of our nuclear names. Like, for example, we could compare GEV with utilities, right? So you can see how nuclear has been performing. This nuclear name has been performing against the larger sector here, which they're pretty much on par, which is very fascinating. We could look at, let's see, CEG versus the large nuclear sector. Similar idea, right? So we could see that CEG had fallen behind and then caught up a little bit there. We could compare two nuclear names to each other. So let's just compare CCJ here. Oops. Oh, come on. I'm blowing it. Fix this to be candle style again. And you can generally see how these names have been moving together. So anyway, pretty kind of cool, fun way to potentially analyze two different names on top of each other. You could add, I think, even more studies in this too, but obviously it'll start to only get more and more complicated. But I wanted to just give that kind of quick little workflow there. With that said, I could focus on just reviewing a couple charts with you all if we don't have any questions. So I'll just give you a couple seconds to maybe put in any questions you have on the subject, and we can start reviewing some names and kind of comparing it with its overall sector and seeing what we think. Anything else before we move into that? SMR levels for share entries. Yeah, we'll move on. All right. Let's start looking at some names, compare them to their overall sector. So let me get a two-panel comparison up here. Let's just go with SPY, low style black. All right. So SMR, we will compare this to our power utilities, so XLU, just because why not? SMR for a share entry. Now, obviously, this name is up 40% today, and it's got earnings on the 7th of November. So certainly don't want to get caught chasing this name higher. It's also up over almost 1,800%, or never mind, 900% in approximately a year. So want to be a little bit careful getting too excited on the shares here. Honestly, you could definitely chase the momentum higher with an entry somewhere around this 16 or even $17 area. If I really wanted to feel confident with any kind of share entry on this name, though, I would at least wait for this one to return to the weekly EMAs. We have three really massive pushes away from these weekly EMAs, which generally could signal some kind of reversal or longer term consolidation period. So I personally wouldn't be in a rush to get in long up here. Just as a share trader, right? I would much rather be a bit more patient, and if it moves on without me higher, so be it. But you also got earnings coming up soon. This thing's up 40% today. and probably even more than that this week. So I personally, if I was trading this, would be more patient and probably wait for these EMAs to come back to play on the weekly, which right now are at 12.50, but in the next couple of weeks they'll probably be closer to the $14 or $15 area. I'd even maybe wait for some kind of consolidation, some kind of just flag or handle form. In general, though, I mean, very clear this name is exhibiting relative strength, right? I mean, this is the most buy volume this name has experienced in the last, I mean, ever probably. So anyway, I think my shorter answer is I wouldn't buy it here. I would consider buying it at 17. I'd consider buying it at 16. I'd be most happy to buy it around the weekly EMAs. Hopefully that answers your question acceptably, SK. But I would be more patient on this. I wouldn't be buying in here, no matter how good it looks. It's a little bit late, I think. You're probably chasing. All right, what sector would Chewy be in? Do I see any levels for the upside? Yeah, so Chewy, I would probably suggest. I mean, we could check actually. So that's analyze or analyze tab here. Why does this look so weird? All right, CHHWY. So let's see if it tells us what sector it's in. Maybe I'm just missing it. Doesn't tell us here, but I could just look up Chewy sector. I would say it's consumer discretionary. Chewy market sector. Why is it not coming in? Yeah, so Chewy is a consumer discretionary name. And the way I found that out was I just looked it up and it came up on the NY or NASDAQ website. Yeah, so it's a consumer discretionary. So it's going to fit in with your kind of other retailers, kind of like your Macy's, your TJ Maxx, Ross, that sort of thing. Just like things you can buy, but you don't have to. Any levels for upside on Chewy? Let's take a look. And then consumer discretionary, let's see. I think that's XLP. No, that's consumer staples. I don't remember consumer discretionary. Forget off the top of my head. ETF. XLY. I would have never remembered that. All right, so comparing Chewy here, we'll take a look at the weekly time frame first for starters. All right, so in general, Chewy seems to be lagging the rest of the sector. The sector is much closer to highs than Chewy is. That said, though, it does still have its own reasons for looking, I'd say, decent. You got some pretty above average volume here, here, and here. So certainly some signs of accumulation around these levels. I could even zoom back out a little bit. Okay, yeah, even better. So it looks like it's actually pushing up against a pretty significant long-term downtrend, which we could probably pull down all the way. Oh, never mind. We're way past that. Never mind. Okay, let's take a look here. All right. Chewy right now isn't my favorite setup personally. I think it is still probably tradable though if you really want to. It's holding the 50 simple moving average pretty nicely, and volume patterns look okay. Um, it isn't something that I'm jumping out of my seat to get involved in personally. If I was going to get long on it, it probably would just be, I don't know. You kind of got to wait to be above 30, but this 29.8 level seems to be important. So you could wait for that. Probably take your trims around there and then up to there. That's probably how I would structure a trade on it, but it's not something that I'm personally pretty excited about. But that's, I guess, how I would trade it is get long above the 29.7 and then start to trim up at 30, 40, and then 33. But again, not really something that I would want to get involved in. Just me personally. Doesn't say that it's not, doesn't mean it's not going to rip, but just not something I'm interested in. All right. Gail says most people trade the same names over and over. Meta, Microsoft, Apple, Tesla. Looking at the sector slide I shared, should you consider focusing on a particular sector and learn the patterns, et cetera, even if they are slow moving? Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, Gail. And I think maybe one common misconception that people have, and maybe one common misconception that you could have as a result of this lecture, is that you need to be involved in trading every single name, every single sector of the market, which is totally not true. You don't need to always be in trading long the strongest sector at any given moment. I mean, that's totally not necessary. As a trader, you can do completely fine and very well in the marketplace if you focus on, I mean, even one or two stocks, you could do just fine on. And it doesn't necessarily matter what sector those in, as long as it suits your trading style. So, for example, if you're okay trading names that you're really only going to care about the weekly charts on, and you probably won't even be trading short-term options, it's going to be more long-term focused or share focused. And you can accept that and accept the kind of slower pace, which some people can't, which is beyond me. Yeah, absolutely. That's a completely viable way to go about things. Like in no way, shape, or form do you need to be always trading and always involved in those meta, big cap, mega cap stocks. Me personally, I keep the names that I'm generally at least watching on a weekly basis pretty limited to like 2 to 4 max. So if something's not on my watch list, I just don't stay involved. And then in terms of open trades, I try to also keep it around that same number, closer to the 2 side. Longer term shares are a different story, right? Because you're not really babysitting that on a daily basis. But I highly encourage everybody to limit the number of names that they're trying to trade, especially as you're still learning. As you get a little bit more comfortable, it's easier for you to kind of bounce around on names and you get familiar with kind of just how the market works in general. But yeah, Gail, I think don't be afraid to simplify the names that you trade, and don't be afraid to slow down, especially with kind of what some might refer to as those boomer stocks like your AT&T or Coca-Cola. I mean, those are great names to be trading, especially recently. They're cheap. They don't move too quick. They really love to follow technicals until you get some random news on them. Yeah, and I would recommend, especially individuals that are new, to stay away from your Nvidia, your Tesla. There's just no reason to be getting involved with that. Yeah, can I take a look at Tesla? Yeah, I was looking at that a little bit before this lecture. Tesla's just one that I'm personally avoiding right now. I was a bit interested in it on this move here when it came back down to the EMAs, and you could even see my old alert. I was waiting for it to break back above 250. At this point, it's not something I'm interested in short term, right? We got this open gap above. EMAs are declining. One notable thing is that selling volume is also beginning to drop off. So if you wanted maybe, I'll say, not a riskier trade, but just a trade that's against the trend technically, right? EMAs are moving downwards. And also we have a lower low now for the first time in a couple months. You could get long into this gap, so probably above the 224 spot, and start to take some trims off at 226 or 50 simple there. And then probably have the whole position off your plate right around that 230 area. So there's definitely a trade that can be taken here on Tesla. But me personally, I'm preferring to just sit out on this one. It's a market where we have a strong trend to the upside. I'm not going to focus on names that are not strongly trending or exhibiting some amount of relative strength. So the names that really have my interest right now, I'll give you guys kind of my watch list, is MU. So I purchased some shares on MU back at the 102 spot. The reason that I got involved here was this big gap up on earnings, obviously part of the semi sector as a whole. Didn't really think the sell-off was justified, and real easy way to define your risk here right around this area off of this previous all-time high. So kind of a no-brainer there for me, and still holding that one for the last, it's been probably a little over a week now at this point. So this is the only name I actually have an active trade in, which this is just shares, and I'd be happy to hold this one for the long term too. I think the weekly chart looks great right at the 50 simple, just reclaiming those EMAs, and then also just right on top of a volume shelf as well. So this name's got a lot going for it, in my opinion. Let me just zoom in a bit so it's a bit more clear. So just coming off this volume shelf here and moving its way into a larger volume gap as well, which obviously there's going to be some significance with that. So this is one that I'm actually trading, like Micron a lot. And then some other names that I'm monitoring are kind of as part of that software theme that I mentioned earlier. So I was interested in snow. I saw this breakout last week and wasn't able to get involved. So I'm kind of looking out for this one. It's been pretty weak recently, and I haven't taken the trade, but I'm looking for a retest of 115. Just interested to see what happens there. Big volume shelf there, and especially after this breakout on volume, I'd expect buyers to be stepping in. Uh, Pan W, not one that I'm necessarily interested in trading yet, but certainly getting to the spot where it's time for me to really consider getting in here. Nice flag starting to form right below these previous all-time highs, and the EMA is catching up. So this is one that I'm watching. And then another one is Crowd CRWD. This one just barely didn't get over the 200 simple today. I was watching for this one to close above the 200 simple for a swing, a call swing or some kind of long-sided swing. But it just closed below 306.87 was the simple or the 200 simple, and it closed at 306.24. So I have my alert set here for a break above that 200. I'm happy to get long there, especially after a nice hold of this previous breakout at that 300 spot today. And again, right, reason I'm focused on these names is if you take a look at these kind of alternative tech names and close within IGV, you have this expanded tech sector recently breaking out and coming back to back test that breakout. So certainly at a spot where you want to be involved in this sector, not your typical tech stocks like your semis and your mega caps, but something a bit different, right? Your cybersecurity software names. Those are only coming more and more prevalent, especially with regulations that the government is pushing out, right? You have even the EPA starting to get involved with those cybersecurity regulations. So your software and specifically your cybersecurity names are just getting hotter and hotter and having more and more kind of growth cases for the future. So anyway, that was a really long-winded way for me to say that I'm trading MU and I'm watching CRWD, Snow, and Pan W for right now. But you can kind of see how the names that I'm focused on, at least in the short term, are all theme-based, right? So those software names are all theme-based. Micron, just part of that general semi sector, which obviously has been a strong theme over the last almost 2 years now. Some other examples of active theme trades would be your crypto names, so your Riot, Mara, Coinbase, even Wolf. What else is there? What's that other one? CLSK. So all these names are kind of part of that crypto theme, which has started to show some amount of relative strength here into this week as we see some larger breakouts barely on the verge of happening here with your Bitcoin. Taking a look at Bitcoin futures here, I mean, this is like seriously on the verge of doing something pretty significant. So anyway, that's another example of a potential theme to watch out for, right? If Bitcoin breaks this prior all-time high back at 70K and this downtrend, absolutely going to be a great reason to be paying attention to your crypto names long. Mara, Riot, Coin already starting to move in advance of that and even starting to get interesting on this weekly close or daily close here. Bunch of high volume coming in day after day on this one and reclaiming that 200 simple. So anyway, that's a long-winded way for me to say that the crypto theme is also another one to be paying attention to here over the next week or two. All right, everybody. Cool. Well, that's going to round it out for tonight. As always, appreciate you guys all being here and taking the time out of your day. Yeah, next lecture will be same time, same place on Wednesday. And I can't wait to see you all there and hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Thanks so much. See you guys.